Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Media Monitor, the show that analyses your news media both here at home and abroad. This is the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. I'm Peter Ndoro. Thank you for joining us. Now, for better or for worse, 2018 was quite a year, but it did bring along with it a wide range of incredible journalism. In today's program, we spend time with some of the journalists who did some exceptional award-winning work through the year, and even one whose work over a lifetime has been recognized. So, investigative journalists from 3 media houses won this year's Tako Keper Award for their reporting on the significant influence that the controversial Gupta family had over South Africa's public enterprises, state-owned enterprises, through a series of reports called the Gupta Leaks. We spotlight Sino Manjangaza, who's the recipient of the 2018 Vodacom Journalist of the Year Award in the multi-platform category for his most effective and creative storytelling using multiple media and social platforms. Also highlighted is the photographer Bongani Shulubane, who for his excellence in photojournalism. All of that coming up. Right, before we get into our discussions around the stories, let's first take a look at the stories making your headlines in the Sunday papers today. The Sunday Times is running with the story about retail giant Edcon, owner of Edgar's, South African shopping staple for almost 90 years now. And this, it seems, is on the brink of collapse, putting 140,000 jobs at risk, dealing a massive psychological blow to the economy. Experts are warning that the collapse of Edcon, which opened its first store in central Johannesburg in 1929, would be South Africa's biggest single job loss in the country's history. The City Press, that's leading with a story on how deep divisions are playing out within the ANC over names and processes to select candidates for Parliament and provincial legislatures. This has caused the party for some time forever to postpone its national list conferences scheduled for this weekend to next year. The Sunday Independent is carrying a story on how government is considering reopening the lists of victims who have not shared their apartheid-era abuses 20 years after the final Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. The Sunday Tribune is leading with a story about the Day of Reconciliation. As the country marks this day, there is little unity at the site where a bloody battle was fought years ago between the Afrikaners and the Zulus. There are 2 monuments on the site, the Voortrekker Monument and Blood River Museum, commemorating Afrikaners, whilst the Ncome Museum honors the Zulu warriors who took part in the battle. The Weekend Argus is running with the story on how police and traffic cops had a chaotic start to one of the busiest traffic periods of the festive season, with the death toll already in double digits. At least 17 people were killed on Western Cape roads this weekend as hundreds of people have started travelling to their holiday destinations at the coast and other areas. Across our border, Eswatini Sunday Observer is carrying a story about the cash-strapped Mbabane City Council, which has spent over 1 million Elangeni to erect a historic statue of Queen Gwamile facing the street, which was renamed after her. The yet-to-be-unveiled statue stands tall with the traffic circle near Mbabane City Council. And in West Africa, the front page of Nigeria's Daily Trust is leading with a story about the country's 2019 polls. With barely 60 days to next year's general elections, the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, and the ruling All Progressive Congress, the APC, may be heading for a showdown over the 2018 Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Their disagreement stemmed from the interpretations of President Muhammadu Buhari's refusal to sign the bill into law. Right, now tens of thousands of leaked emails from within the controversial Gupta family empire, referred to as the Gupta Leaks, helped blow the lid on the extent of what has been described as state capture, detailing how the family allegedly managed to influence for their own agenda the most senior officials, from ministers right through to the highest office in the land, former President Jacob Zuma. South Africa's media was largely praised for their role in exposing the state capture project. The Gupta Leaks team continues to win awards, and this year was recognized for its groundbreaking work at the Nat Nakasa Awards and Standard Bank Sivugile Journalism Awards, to mention just a few. Well, we're pleased to be joined in studio now by Paulie van Wyk, an investigative journalist with the Daily Maverick, who was part of this award-winning team. Paulie, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honoured to sit here with you.
All right. So, you've worked on a number of stories, and a lot of them really big, from SARS, even VBS. You've had your hand on there. But this Gupta Leaks story, I think, captured a lot of people because they didn't understand that this could happen in the modern era, in the modern world. One associates this kind of thing often to the mafia in Italy.
Absolutely.
So take us back to first hearing about these leaks, and did you realize straight away what you had?
No, not at all. So Branko Brikic, the editor of Daily Maverick, was the original receiver of a hard drive of over 300,000 emails, documents. It's essentially a copy of a computer that we had that came from inside the Gupta empire. And it was a big secret, and he wanted to get me to come and work with them. And in the end, he sort of won me over by curiosity, and I just wanted to know what this big project of his is. And in the end, he told me it was this massive data leak, and we're going to change the country, and it shows corruption, and it gives us proof of what we've been thinking and wondering and suspecting and claiming all these years, since about 2010, when Amabungani wrote about the Istina farm and how the Guptas were fleecing the farmers' actual money there, and how they took the farm from themselves. And I thought, oh my word, this cannot be, this is fake news. And I told him, Branko, they're trying to trick you, it's not true, cannot be. And in the end, he just looked at me with a smile, and in the end he said, Stefans Brimmer from Amabungani and I, we checked it, we know this is true. And that was when it dawned on me, and I remember how I got goosebumps at the time and thinking, this is going to be a story that's going to change our country. Wow. And it was. In essence, it showed that South Africa was watching the people who stole our eggs eat an omelette, and we didn't know it. Wow.
All right, so what then happens? You've got this hard drive. How does the journalism kick in from that point on? Is it a question of now starting to prove those emails with independent information? What happens?
Absolutely. So it is such a massive data leak that there's just no way that you as one person can work through it all. So we combined the Scorpio Daily Maverick team with Amabungani's team, News 24's team, and then we got data analysts and some people trained in sort of following the money, CAs and so on, to help us work through this. So what we then did, all of us had certain speciality areas. So some of us worked on PRASA or Denel or Telkom or Eskom or so on. So each of us naturally sort of gravitated towards what you knew already. Now, when you go, and it was almost like working on Google. So if you go and search this email or this sort of data leak that you received, and you put in Denel, and obviously all the Denel relevant things, or a certain person, for example, Mr. Duduzane Zuma, all Mr. Duduzane Zuma's links would appear, and you would pick a topic that you would be interested in, and then you're trying to verify it from what you know from your own background, what you see now, and then you go and look at the financials. Because that was one of the greatest coups of this data leak, is that we received the Guptas as much of their financial statements along with the big leak.
So has anything been disproved? Has any of the emails looked suspect, or has been fake, or is the whole block the real thing?
Well, it is legitimate insofar as that it was sent and it was date stamped and it was totally legitimate from the Gupta's side. But you know, people make mistakes. So even when they thought that they would be telling the truth, we always rechecked all of the facts, and because they could have made a mistake even if they thought that they were saying the right thing or the true thing here. But they were also very helpful in keeping data spreadsheets with all of their financials, so we could follow where they sent money to, and we could see how they planned and schemed and tried to manipulate senior government people. So it was highly fascinating to work on it.
So, I mean, you say it's almost like getting a copy of the hard drive, and this would have taken quite a bit of effort. So I guess the family has been trying to find out who it is that let them down. But that person or those people must have felt so much for the country to put themselves at risk in this way. And I suppose this is part of this, the great thing about South Africans and your ability to tell stories is that we've got people who want the truth to come out.
We have amazing people in South Africa and people who really, really care for this country. And without the very brave whistleblowers, we would not have started to change this country and we would not have been where we are. So, but it's difficult to be a whistleblower as well. I mean, look at Mrs. Msilo Motepo, who came out with, before there was even a Gupta Leaks, because she came out with the trillion situation and how 2 weeks before Mr. Nhlanhla was fired that first time around, and Mr. Des van Rooyen was injected for a few days into Treasury. She knew 2 weeks before that this would happen and that Eric Woods and the Guptas were readying themselves for this and gearing up towards it. And she was out of a job for 2 years. I mean, that is just terrible that corporate South Africa didn't give her a job. And then when one must say big ups to MTN for in the end giving her a job.
So many casualties. But it wasn't just the Gupta Leaks. There were other stories that you worked on. The SARS one is something that, and in many ways, a lot of these stories you really have to keep digging away for months and sometimes years to get to the truth.
Indeed. So the SARS stories I'm very proud of. I worked on it for 4 years of my career, which is quite a big chunk. And in the end, Mr. Tamoyani was fired because of it. Mr. Jonas Makwakwa resigned because of our stories. Mrs. Refilwe Mokoena, who was the head of legal at SARS, was also fired in the end based on our stories, and especially the 420 rand in VAT payments that she allowed to be paid to the Guptas. And in the end, it feels as if we did our part to ensure that SARS will be able to turn around and be better again and make target again, because our government has a very big spending program, and if we have a limping SARS with this big expenditure program, we're heading for big trouble.
How significant will VBS become, do you think, when the dust is settled?
Sure, VBS is quite a vast story and there's so much to write about still. So in essence 2 billion was stolen from the bank, and it was siphoned off through various schemes, but it was the very poor and the very vulnerable who were robbed in the end. So it seems as if all political parties, or most of them, received money here. And we must always remember that the EFF may have gotten 16 million or a bit more, and the ANC or various parts of it and several business people seems to have received more. But we need to focus on all the role players here, especially the people that are trying to show us that they're going to be kingmakers in the next election, and that are trying to style themselves as anti-corruption leaders and pushing out Mr. Nhlanhla or attacking Mr. Pravin Gordhan, or telling us that they should be regarded as, people on the moral high ground. It's going to be an interesting factor going into the elections, because all polls show that the ANC is getting stronger, and they are, even though they had a massive part in it, the biggest part in it ostensibly, they have already come out and said, okay, we agree, there's a lot wrong here, and we're in the business of firing and in the process of firing certain people and kicking them out. And the EFF sort of gone another route. They said that they checked each other's bank accounts and they found nothing wrong there. So in the end, again, as with Mr. Zuma in the beginning of the year and towards the end of last year, the South African public will have to stand up and say, either I accept this or I am not going to accept this. And journalists can only go so far. We can only tell you what is the truth. In the end, this is your decision.
People must make up their minds.
Yeah.
There have been consequences, I guess, for digging and looking at stories. And we're talking about VBS, and there's this thing now between you and the EFF. Does that concern you? And does it concern you that politicians are now starting to really go after journalists in a way that we haven't seen in a long time?
Absolutely. It's uncharacteristic of our politics. I mean, I've written a lot about the ANC, especially about corruption in the ANC before, and about Mr. Moyane. Now, Mr. Moyane has taken me to the press ombud. He has lost solidly, but he's taken the right route. He has never attempted to bully me in this way. Now, it's very interesting how the EFF has targeted certain women. Me, Ranjeni Munsami from TISO Black Star, Ferial Hafaji also from Daily Maverick. It seems as if it's the women that gets all the attention. And then it's not, you know, we have a problem with point 1, 2, 3 and 4 of your story. We're calling you Satan and all sorts of words that I can't repeat on air, but you know, so it's your credibility that they attack and not the points that you're raising. And then again, you can see that the sort of their way of doing things are clear, because the only real threat now is from the journalists, because the Hawks and the NPA is seemingly not doing their work. They're not acting on this. So the only real threat is from journalists. So let's target the journalists. Let's tell the people that they are liars, that they're racist, that they shouldn't be believed, and that their credibility is totally lacking. Then there's no risk here. Well,
Paulie, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Congratulations on the recognition that you've received, and I guess it's been a rewarding journey for you, and you know, the digging has impacted and helped South Africa along the way, and I guess that gives you a great sense of pride.
Yes, indeed, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you very much indeed for the work that you do. Take care, have a great 2019.
Thank you.
We look forward to your stories.
Thank you.
All right, that's where we're going to leave it with Paulie van Beek. More award-winning journalists after this. Stay with us.
Fashion, travel, music, food, and food. Did I mention food?
We at Trends Travel love bringing you cuisines from around the world.
Forbes US have declared Gabon the coolest city destination to visit in the world for 2018-2019.
You know, as designers, we're always setting trends and also doing like high fashion. So it was quite nice to come and see the ready-to-wears every day.
We at Network explore all things technological.
The modern battlefield is the battlefield of the mind, and the tools for affecting the mind are social media.
We look at how technology advances medicine and education.
Children can learn up to 60% more information in a shorter condensed amount of time using virtual reality as a medium for instruction.
From music, gaming, even computer-generated supermodels. Be a part of our network Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. and Sundays at 5:30 p.m.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, it's often said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Storytelling through pictures is the work of photojournalists, and it requires a skill that's not easy to describe, the ability to decide the best way to shoot a scene so that an image can fully capture a story for the viewer. An example, well, in January, some students desperate to register at UNISA jumped over the palisade fencing to try and get inside the registration hall. Some said at the time that they had been waiting since the early hours of the morning and the gates remained closed. First, a few young men were helped up, and then that was followed by a few women. Well, African Agency News freelance photographer Bongani Shilubane was there and captured those moments, and his work won him the Standard Bank Sivukile Journalism Award for 2018. Congratulations, first of all. Great award to win. Is photojournalism something you always wanted to do?
Yes, it's something that I always wanted to do. Like, I remember, I was inspired by Matimba Heben Pangana. He used to work for Pretoria News, then last he was working for New Age. And Semzima again, we're coming from the same rural place in Mpumalanga, Pushback Ridge. Those are the photographers that have inspired me. And
then you get an award. Was it something you expected?
Not really, but I will say when you work hard, you get what you deserve. You know, like I've been working hard. I joined Pretoria News straight fresh from varsity 2014. December, and then I've been a freelancer. I joined as an intern. I've been a freelancer until today. I'm still a freelancer, but I just managed to get this award. I just hope this award gonna open doors for those doors there for me. Like it's not an easy thing as a freelancer to get such award.
No, well done. Congratulations. So, you know, you've got to be at the right place at the right time, but above and beyond that, you've got to know what to do with the camera. So take us to UNISA at that day, and you arrive, and what are the decisions that you're making in terms of where to frame your shot, how close to get in, how to tell the story? Take us through that process.
It was early this year during registration time at UNISA. After the former president have announced the free education. So the students went there to register. Most of the various of the varsities, they have announced no walks-in will be allowed for registration. Though the student leadership at UNISA, they said no. It's their culture of the varsity. They encourage students to come and make sure that everything is processed and everything. So the gates were closed. When I get there with my colleagues, the gate were closed. Students have been queuing, long queues. Then the gate were closed. Students have been waiting impatiently. So they have announced that all of the students must go home. They must come back tomorrow to get registered. Don't forget, they've been waiting there since, some of them since in the morning. They're coming from far. So what happened? They started jumping the gates.
Right.
I was standing on top of a wall with some other journalism. I saw students jumping the gates and everything, based on the desperation, but as a photojournalist, I was shooting wide. I was using a wide lens.
Yeah.
Then I've been capturing those moments. Then I heard a background, like a crowd, like in some noise. They're screaming, you know, when they're screaming like something, like just if ever there is something that's going to happen. Then I looked closer. Then I saw this other young lady, fat young lady, like preparing to jump the gates. And then as a photojournalist, I have made a decision where I was using wide lens. I changed my wide lens to my long lens so that I can zoom in, so that specifically I wanted to get her.
Right.
Before I was shooting wide, but when I saw that moment, I made that decision to change to long lens so that I can get closer to it.
What made you think to do that? Is it just an instinct that you have? Is this where the ability to be a good photojournalist comes in?
I will say it's a photographic eye that I have.
Right.
When you are a photojournalist, you need to see a picture before it appears. So that's something that I have. That's something that I've been taught from school. So that's what gave me that picture. I saw it before it happens. Luckily, it happens just like that.
Right. So, but this isn't the only picture you've taken. Is it something you start to develop a skill for over time? Tell me about your journey, because you've only been at it a short time.
My journey, it's still something that it's difficult to talk about because of, like, you know, as I already said, the frustration of being a freelancer. You know, you've been on a vacuum where it limits you to learn more things. But as a photojournalist, I see myself far. I see myself achieving more of this. I see myself working abroad.
Right, right. And it's incredible that you're still a freelancer, and I suppose, hopefully, with this award, it might change things for you and you get hired full-time.
That's, as I said in my intro, that like I believe this award can open the closed doors that have been closed outside there.
All right. Listen, congratulations. Well done. And we wish you the best of luck in 2019. And perhaps you'll get international awards. Who knows, hey?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. And well done once again. Bongani Shilobane, winner of the photojournalist picture taken outside Unisa. Well done.
Thanks.
All right, okay, so what we're going to do now is chat to another winning journalist, Sino Manjagaza, who is from Tiso Black Star. And he won the 2018 Vodacom Journalist of the Year in the multi-platform category. And he joins us on the line now. Sino, thanks very much for joining us on this program. Congratulations on winning this particular award, and it is an interesting one, and we'll talk about what it means to be on multi-platforms. But let's start with the story itself. Tell us about what inspired you to cover it and go into it.
Okay, the story was about the bad living conditions of students from the Eastern Cape University. So students have been calling me, complaining about the bad conditions they live, and eventually I decided, instead of just taking their word, decided to go there and look for myself and see for myself what they were talking about. And then I was shocked to really see the bad conditions those students were living under. You get students allocated into rooms that have bottom beds, others no windows. One student told me that the room that he used to occupy was once a toilet, but was converted into a room. There's no proper study area. I mean, all those standards that are set by the Department of Higher Education and Training for accommodation. They were all they were not regarded.
All right, so tell me about deciding to tell the story on a number of platforms. What informed that?
Okay, I started my career as a journalist, and then I moved to photography department and then online. So I had a better now understanding of what pictures would work for my story, because I also wrote the stories myself. Even the videos. So I took the videos and then I'll edit the videos myself. So even before taking the video, I know what is going to work to the video, the final selection, even the pictures. I know what pictures would tell my story. So that kind of experience helped me in terms of deciding what I want to make, that the information is true and is getting across.
And what does it do you think, for the story to express it in different platforms and different formats?
I think it gives it power and it makes it more credible. Because as a newspaper, we write stories, social bit, but if there are visuals, if there are videos, there are pictures, there are people talking on camera about their problems, it gives more credibility.
And I suppose the skill then becomes knowing what portion of the story to tell on which platform and at what time.
Yes, exactly. And fortunately, with the company that I'm working for, the project, I'm looking at the digital sales deal. Now, it helps in terms of knowing how to use all the skills that you have, like you must be able to take your own videos, if you are on the screen, you must be able to write something. So it really helps.
So are you the journalist of the future where, journalists are going to have to be able to do more than 2 or 3 things, and at the same time as they're seeing a scene unfold, be thinking about how to download that particular story into print, into video, into pictures, and into social media even? Is this where journalism is going?
Actually, at the end, I'm called, what is this word that we're using? Oh, not in the wrong way. What is it that I do? Writing stories, next week I'm taking pictures, that week I'm taking videos. So I do everything. Sometimes there's something happening. I don't think exactly that he do here.
All right, Sino Manjangaza, we're going to say congratulations to you once again. We're going to have to leave it there because the line broke, unfortunately. But well done. Congratulations on your award. And it is a skill, I think, that takes a certain type of training and an eye and a natural ability to be able to tell stories on different platforms and knowing what to use when to tell the stories. And you've been recognized as the Vodacom Journalist of the Year in the multi-platform category for your talent. So well done, congratulations, and thanks for talking to us. Right, after the break, we chat to veteran journalist Amina Frensa about her accomplishments over a lifetime.
Fashion, travel, music, food, and food. Did I mention food?
We at Trends Travel love bringing you cuisines from around the world.
Forbes US have declared Gabon the coolest city destination to visit in the world for 2018-2019.
You know, as designers, we're always setting trends and also doing like high fashion. So it was quite nice to come and see the ready-to-wears every day.
Hey, Baba. You've been partying the whole night.
You complain a lot, man. If it's not the leaves, then it's the noise.
I've asked you so nicely before. Now I'm calling my lawyer.
Ooh, I am so scared. And like, where's your lawyer?
My lawyer is right here. Can't tell neighbors.
Problems with the neighbors, rental disputes, advice on maintenance matters, drawing up a will. Clientele Legal will speak up for you. SMS DEFEND to 32281. We'll call you back.
Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor. Now, veteran journalist and media stalwart Amina Frensa won the Vodacom Journalist of the Year Lifetime Achiever Award. Amina has a long career of several decades in the mainstream media industry, both locally and internationally. And she's a former managing editor of news and current affairs right here at the SABC, and is also a founding member of SANEF. Amina has worked in many countries abroad as a producer and a foreign correspondent. She was associate producer of the Oscar-nominated Mandela, Son of Africa, and also co-author of the book Mandela. Thanks very much for joining us, Amina. So good to see you again.
Good to be here.
We spent some time together here. So you get this award, Lifetime Achievement Award, and I just wonder what was your emotions and your thoughts as this recognition came?
Well, it was humbling as well as overwhelming in a sense to get this peer recognition, because basically one is nominated by one's peers, and I think some of those peers we've had parallel paths in the media in the past and in the present. So I think that for me is very important. But there I was receiving the award in front of, you know, a room full of talented individuals, winners of other awards in other categories and so on. And it was a night to remember.
Looking back at your career, was it all worth it? Was it what you thought when you took your first steps?
It's been a long road. It's been a long journey. And it takes one back, as it indicated, over decades. There are many highlights, and the working conditions were very different then to what it is now. Today it's much easier, you know, with social media and advanced technology. You know, then when I started, I worked in film, and then, you know, film had to be either developed first, in a dark room, in a can, and then edited and then, sent by satellite, to my foreign networks and so on, or, put on a plane and get to, our networks the next day, the next morning. So it's a very different working environment. No cell phones, life consisted of what is your contacts, what's in your head, what knowledge you have, and massive filing cabinets.
Yeah.
Today things are at your fingertips, and it's wonderful today, especially to work on a multimedia platform. But there were many highlights that take us back. Just to confine myself perhaps to Southern Africa, for example, I worked in former Rhodesia, which became Zimbabwe. In the process, I was declared a prohibited immigrant by Ian Smith, who was working for German television at the time. In South Africa itself, several arrests, including in the Kwandebele homeland, where there was, pressure put on German television that I worked for, to say that I'm not wanted. They can supply German television with somebody else like me, but I'm not supposed to, get into Kwandebele or work for them. And they just made life difficult. And then there's the Namibian situation, which South Africa occupied illegally. Many arrests there, and I've covered many stories and made quite a number of documentaries, especially in Ovamboland, where the Namibian people, were subjected to the illegal occupation, repressive occupation by South Africa, our then South Africa, apartheid South Africa. So these are some of the highlights in the area, and of course, attempted coup in Lesotho while we were airborne and almost got shot down and had to really, not land the plane.
So the thing about staying the course is that you've got to keep motivated, and there are times when it's scary, getting arrested and all those kinds of things, but what was the motivation for you, and do you feel that you were making a difference?
Yes, most certainly, especially as far as the fall of the previous apartheid regime is concerned. Yes, we did a lot of work. Yes, we exposed a lot. I suppose we were a combination of investigative journalists at the time, but it also became very dangerous. There was a prison sentence, an arrest looming if I used my name. So a lot of stories, were broadcast abroad, and we tried to inform our public abroad about, what is happening in South Africa and in other regimes around the world. So yes, I believe it made a difference. Some would say maybe a small difference, but I believe it did make a difference. We were media activists, and I believe we still are today. Freedom of expression, interest. And there's a frustration today about what is happening around the world, and there's not enough said by us South African journalists about what's happening, about hundreds of journalists being arrested in Turkey, journalists disappearing in Tanzania and elsewhere, and it's a journalist is an endangered species today, and it's very hard. Although it is easier to work with the advent of social media and so on, but I think it's very, very hard if our colleagues are, disappearing, if our colleagues are threatened like they are here in South Africa by a political party and others, and bullied. So it is very hard, and people give up. And I really applaud those who stay the course and say, you will not shut me down. You might kill me, but you won't kill my ideas.
So the good thing about having had such a long career is that you're able to see trends, how things have changed over time. Tell me about what you've seen change over time in terms of the storytelling, the journalism, and your thoughts about it. Has it been good? Has it been bad? Has it been, oh dear?
Well, I think we all learn, and I think some of us are on a lifelong learning curve, but I think the basics are, good storytelling. And I think if we go back to the basics, what is good storytelling, and focus it. But also, what is journalism and what is news? For example, does it have to be fair? Does it have to be ethical? And the answer is yes, it has to be fair, it has to be ethical, and these are values that we ought to retain, these are values we ought to go back to, these are values that we need to do our checks and balances against. So something called fake news, it's a misnomer in a sense, because what is news? It's got to be balanced, it's got to be fair, it's got to be truthful. So if it's not truthful, it is not news. So therefore, fake news, it can't be. It's a bit of a contradiction in terms. But I think it's a wild place out there at the moment. The media is under pressure, not only individual journalists, but media houses and things like that. The environment is changing. The economic model is changing. There's desperation out there to make money. There's desperation out there also to spread untruths, whether it is a big advertising company, whether it's a multinational, but those with deep pockets, that will prevail. But I'm involved in media training today. I'm with the Institute for the Advancement of Journalism. I'm also with the Press Council, and so on. So I would appeal to the public to be vigilant, to use these instruments at our disposal, but also to invest in good journalism, to invest in training, and to invest in investigative journalism, because I think that is what will continue to make the world a better place.
Yeah, and it's been quite life-changing for us in South Africa in recent years, for sure. So you talked about highlights, but you were very modest. You've met many amazing people in your career. Nelson Mandela must be one that stands out, and working on this book, and I just wonder, in doing that kind of work, what was the experience like for you, and just meeting these people over time?
Yes, well, it was very humbling. The day after Mr. Mandela was released, he came to Johannesburg. I was working for German television. I decided not to go to Cape Town because we couldn't get back in time, stayed in Johannesburg, so I met him the next day. And I think what for me was humbling, because while he was in prison, I had sent him photographs in prison of his birthplace and relatives and his graveyard and so on. And he had written back to me from prison to say what these photographs meant. And he said, when I get out of prison, at the time he had no idea when he would be released, if ever, when I get out of prison, I'll show you my beautiful parts of the country. So can you imagine that this great man's been away for 27 years, instantly recognizes who I am. I mean, he had a memory like an elephant or whatever. Instantly recognized me, instantly tells me, you're coming with me on my trip to the Transkei. And that's what he did. He was true to his word. Well, some family members and others on the Free Mandela Committee, I was on that committee as well, a little flabbergasted, what gives you the right? and true to his word, I accompanied him to his first trip back home to the Transkei, and I was his honored guest. So for me, you cannot quantify it. It's just an amazing highlight. And from there, we had an amazing relationship. I spent about 3 years with him, traveling the world, to some place of the world, working on Mandela, Son of Africa, which was Oscar nominated. But I was also friends of Winnie Mandela and the family and the Sisulus and other leaders as well. So for me to have been, welcomed into their homes, into their hearts, into their private space, and allowing me to tell their story over the years, for me that is humbling. For me that is what makes it worth it, if you want to ask if it made it worth it. But there are other humble people that I've met as well, who have really welcomed me as a journalist with open arms. People who don't know me, people, so it's a very noble profession. And if you get people's trust, don't betray that trust. And what is important as well in this day and age is our credibility. It's not for sale.
Amina, are we going to have to bring you into the studio again to have a real long chat? But thank you so much for joining us and sharing in just a few minutes some of the highlights of an incredible career, and one that continues. And we're glad that you're taking those skills into teaching and training the next generation. Thanks so much indeed, and congratulations on your Lifetime Achievement Award.
Thank you.
Great, wonderful. Okay, we're going to take another quick break, and then afterwards, one of my favourite journalists in the Eastern Cape. Find out who she is and why she won an award.
We at Network explore all things technological.
The modern battlefield is the battlefield of the mind, and the tools for affecting the mind are social media.
We look at how technology advances medicine and education.
Children can learn up to 60% more information in a shorter condensed amount of time using virtual reality as a medium for instruction.
From music, gaming, even computer-generated supermodels. Be a part of our network Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. and Sundays at 5:30 p.m.
Clientele funeral plans.
It's your final gift of love.
I chose a clientele funeral plan because it's affordable and suits my budget.
I chose clientele because they are an original. They've been around for a long time, and I know with them my family are in good hands.
I'm a farmer and I'm a businessman, and I know a good deal when I see one. Clientele is a good deal.
Clientele is the name I trust.
SMS plan to 31043 and we'll call you back.
Right, welcome back. Now, my final guest is one of my favourite journalists in the Eastern Cape. At this year's Vodacom Journalism Awards, the judging panel looked for powerful, in-depth sports journalism beyond the reporting on results and numbers. And this was a fiercely contested category with stories that made the headlines and got sporting public talking. From boxing to soccer to cricket to everything in between, journalists were hard at work with a great passion and education. Well, you know, winners stood out, and one person we're going to talk to now with her well-produced and very entertaining entry at the Port Elizabeth aerobatics pilot is Patrick Davison, and the winner was Jade Lee Polser of the SABC. Thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to the program. We're so proud of your achievements. So let's start with this award-winning story. What brought your attention to it, and what is it about how you told it that you think got recognized?
Thank you for having me, Peter. Well, I must first say that, you know, I'm not a sports reporter. I'm a court reporter. I do a bit of politics, but sports was really not, up my alley. But I think when I heard about Patrick Davison being chosen for the Class Challenger Act, it's a very prestigious aerobatic pilot competition, and he was handpicked and the only South African that was chosen to go and compete in France. And I mean, he was in my back door, Port Elizabeth. I thought, you know what? Let me put the court stories aside, Peter, and let me just dabble in sports. And I went and I interviewed him, and I thought to myself, how am I going to tell the story that's going to grab the nation? How am I going to explain what it is to be in a fighter jet, the speed that these pilots have to endure? So I decided, well, let's get into the plane with him, and I mounted a GoPro. I literally went up, in the plane. I put my fears aside, and it was quite entertaining for the nation because you heard a couple of screams here and there. But I think I also, combated my fear for heights and for fast things. Because I mean, you're going 500 kilometers per hour. It's faster than the world's roller coaster. So it really was an adrenaline rush. But I told the story and I entered it into the Vodacoms, and surprisingly, I won in the sports category. And I think for me, it was very interesting to see that, a court reporter can go up against the best sports reporters, but it also goes to show the versatility that one can have. You can move from politics to court to sports and be a wholesome journalist, all-rounder. So it was a very interesting story, a very entertaining story, and one of the best stories and that I enjoyed doing, Peter.
Well, you talk about sports journalism, but sometimes, and a lot of times, these stories are human stories, and they just happen to fall into these categories that we created. And I suspect it was more just that you told a fascinating human story that won you this award. I've bungee jumped, and that was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. But watching you in that plane just now, I don't know how you kept your tummy inside your tummy.
When I went up with Patrick, he said, Jade, I know this is not your forte. I know that you don't dabble in, adrenaline and sportsy things. So I'm going to take it easy on you. But before I even got into the plane, he said to me, okay, I'm going to start off slowly. We'll take it gently and see how it goes. And the next thing I knew, I was screaming. So when I got off the plane, I was like, okay, It's a lot. It's a lot. These sports reporters really go through a lot, from fast cars to, you know, adrenaline, like you said, these type of stories. But Peter, just to make mention of the fact that, you know, if you highlight the Eastern Cape, especially the Eastern Cape province and the type of journalists that you get from this province, I mean, they're very versatile. I mean, like I said, I come from a court background and I dabbled in sports, but we've got amazing journalists in the Mthatha office, like Zimkita Manginana, we've got Busisiwe Jemsana in the Bisho office, we've got Iviwe Poti, Lerato Tipa, and you know, we're all like a family here in the Eastern Cape, and we all, you know, support each other. So there really isn't a beat. We'll go from covering dog stories to covering politics to covering court to covering everything in between, all the odds and sods. And I think that's what makes the SABC also very versatile, is that you see Jade Lee Paulser doing a Omotosa story, doing a Bird Island story, covering a dog story, covering a sports story, and you get to interact with that being and know that, you know what, they're also human. They enjoy these kind of stories, and by telling these stories, you also get to interact with the nation. So it was very exciting. To date, one of the best stories I've done, and they are very interesting as well.
Well, Jade Lee, we're very proud of you and the entire team in the Western Cape as well as across the country. But well done on your award, and we look forward to more award-winning journalism from you in 2019.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks so much. That was Jade Lee Paulser who won for that amazing story. Very exciting, but I certainly will not be flying upside down at 500 kilometers an hour in the near future. But that's where we're going to leave Media Monitor. Thanks very much for joining us. Have a great 2019, everybody. Bye-bye.